All right. Hello, Jen. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So, first off, I've seen some of your commentary on kind of like some of the typical teacher narratives that people have toward what teachers do and who they are. Why are teachers more than just babysitters?
Man, it's a good question. There's just so much I feel like that goes into teaching,
Hmm.
that of course, like people outside of the classroom, don't understand or realize, which is no fault to them because like
Hmm.
they're not there. They feel like they have been, right? Because they were in
Yeah.
school, but they haven't been. And so yeah, there's so many things that even like my mom was a teacher for 35 years. And so I feel
Hmm.
like I've been in this like environment and mindset my whole life. But even so, like, I'm on maternity leave right now and it's easy to forget like when you're in it, like how that is and like how it
Hmm.
feels and just that like brain fog and like exhaustion and like it's yeah, like and that's I think what's so hard to like explain to other people. And now that I'm just even like 4 months out of the classroom for maternity
Hmm.
leave, like I'm like seeing almost like why I can see like why people don't realize like how much like how much goes
Yeah.
into it,
Yeah.
all the like daily decisions, like the time you spend outside of the classroom, like planning and preparing. Um, yeah, it's just there's so many things.
Yeah. Because in trying to combat this myself because I guess my grandfather was a teacher like way back in the day, but I'm the only one in my family who decided to I guess what's the word for it? Take take an alternative route, I would say, and go into teaching. Like I worked at summer camps for like 4 summers, and again, that was ages. I love the age group 5 to 10
Really?
when there's no education involved.
Okay, okay, yeah, yeah.
When it was just kind of like, yeah, like you're just having fun playing dodgeball, like kind of the typical things, trying to find fun games, but
Yeah.
then trying to corral them in a school setting where, oh, I actually have to teach them things. That was like my first practicum. I had to teach grade 8.
Oh,
And
yikes.
honestly, bless the hearts of all the. Have you ever taught junior high yourself?
No, I
Uh,
I was I'm certified to, and that's what my
yeah.
mom taught, and I actually had interviewed at her school as my first teaching interview, and thank God I did not get that job because it would be so yeah, it would not have been for me.
So, did your mom ever give you, like, major warning signs? Like, did she ever warn against it?
Yes, oh my
Yeah.
gosh, still reminds me to this day, like, "I told you not to go into teaching," like, of course, she was so passionate, like, that was obviously, like, why I
Mhm.
wanted to become a teacher, but yeah, she was like, "Isn't there anything else you can do?" And I was always like, "No," like, "This is it," and even now, I feel like, tries to encourage me to, "Well, why don't you go and do, like, PD?" Or, like, just
Yeah.
yeah, she gets it, she stopped teaching the year before COVID, and so she, like, didn't get to and so she knows even, like, how much it's, like, transformed even since then, but
Mhm.
yeah, she definitely tried very hard to get me to do anything else, and,
So, why do you think there was no other option? It's just like, "Yeah, this is just what I'm gonna do."
you know, that's a good question. So my dad was a police officer, she was a teacher, so I,
Uh-huh.
like, feel like I very much grew up in this, like, helping,
Service,
serving
yeah.
yeah, and it just, like, came so naturally to me, and I noticed, like, I don't know what age, but I just noticed that, like, this I love, like, the feeling of helping people.
Mhm.
I love to go to my mom's classroom and, like, help her students, even though they were,
Yeah.
middle schoolers and I was younger than them, but, she taught special ed she taught special ed and, yeah, so
Oh, okay, cool.
I loved being at school with her. That was like literally every year on my birthday, she taught in a different district than I went to. And we always had a day off that she didn't right around my birthday. And I would go to her classroom every year, like, and spend the day there. That was like my thing I looked forward to on my birthday. It was just like, I just loved it. And so like when it came time to figure out like, okay, what do I want to do? I like thought about some other things, but I just like always came back to teaching. And I don't know if it's just because it's like all I've ever known, like with my
Yeah.
mom, or, I just, yeah, it just felt like this is like what I'm meant to do type thing.
Well, because I'll
unfortunately.
always, for better or worse,
Yeah.
I'll always talk to my students now because I teach grade 12 mostly.
Okay.
And so I'm in Alberta, so we have like two kind of main streams where there's like a -1 and -2. It's
Okay.
not, we don't try to keep it too complicated here. It's like the one's more difficult than the other.
Yeah.
But the students will tell me, they're like, yeah, like I want to go into business. I'm like, what even is that? Like,
Right,
what do
right.
you mean? Like, what do you study in business? I'm like, ah, yes, the supply chain. Like, I think I get it, but I don't know. I don't even really know why teaching was it for me. Like, I remember I had a teacher who was saying, like, I guess not that teachers are millionaires by any means, but when I was kind of going through high school, it, one of my teachers told me kind of like what the salary was, and like kind of once you max out, I was like, oh, like that's not 30 grand a year, but it's like it's not whatever, but
Yeah.
it seemed like a fun position to me. And
Yeah.
honestly, I think I was a history major. I know, classic. Going in, and I always had this vision in my mind of just like, I'm just going to deliver the most powerful history lessons known to man. Like, my classroom's just going to be this cocoon filled with knowledge. And then you get here and there's kids on phones and everyone's sleeping. You're like, what
You're like,
do?
yeah, this is not what I imagined.
So did you ever go into like special education as well? Or is it always kind of English?
Yeah, so on like any like career test I took, it would always be like special ed teacher. And my mom was always like, I think you should do special ed if you're,
Mhm.
if this is what you're gonna do. But
Yeah.
I don't know why I don't know if it was just like wanting to rebel against what my mom, I don't know. But I
Slight
did,
rebellion.
yeah, I did
I'm gonna
work
teach
it.
other things.
Yeah. I worked in the summer while I was in college. I worked at a like extended year program with actually like K through 3 special ed students, and I loved it. And so
Mhm.
I was like, should I change my major? But then I was kind of like too far into it, and I was just like, I can always go back maybe and get certified if. So I didn't. I didn't do special ed, but I feel like sometimes I'm like, maybe that would have been a good route for me. But at the same time, like I do love like writing and talking about those things. And I'm like naturally kind of like a sarcastic person, and I just wanted to be able, I guess, to like make sure I could like have that like be like myself in that way. And that's why I think I eventually just went the like high school English route is like how I settled on it.
Yeah, and I told the story on here a couple times, but I always thought the people who have the passion for special education specifically, like, I just learned quickly, I'm not equipped to do it.
Yeah.
Like, I remember
Yeah.
I worked, like, for the Autism Society, like, here in my, town, and I did thoroughly enjoy it, but it was this one of the kids I had, he was nonverbal autistic, he was 7 years old, and like, I just didn't know how to, like, because I guess you're used to, like, maintaining order,
Yeah. Yeah.
rather efficiently, I would say,
Mhm.
and but some of the people there, like, they just knew how to, like, regulate the kids so quickly, and
Yeah.
I just didn't have that. I don't know what, maybe I could've, and maybe if I had given it more of a chance, but I find the people that usually go into it, like, sticks.
Yeah.
And for some reason, that seems to be where they find their niche, but yeah.
Absolutely. And I agree. I don't think I have that either.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Yeah.
makes
And so how
sense.
long have you been teaching for?
This is my 11th year technically. I
Okay.
taught obviously at the beginning of this year and then went on
Mhm.
to maternity leave, but yeah, this is my 11th year teaching.
So, I feel like 11 years is, like, a healthy run so far, and what is pre and post COVID like for you
Ugh.
for teaching?
Man, like so um my dissertation for my doctorate actually kind of like we I didn't want to because at that point we were just like in the trenches of COVID, and I didn't want to have to do our dissertation about anything related to COVID, but like how my program
Mhm.
worked, like you work with a partner and they like kind of like assign you to to like a school, like so you're doing like research for like a real school and blah blah. Anyway,
Mhm.
so we got to talk to teachers, which ended up being really cool about like literally in the middle of COVID. So it was like in I think 2021. So when teachers were like teaching virtually and in person at the same time, which is just a nightmare. And so anyway, it was just really interesting to like hear like teachers' perspectives and like kind of confirm like what I was experiencing myself in the classroom, and then like talking to other teachers. I was just like kind of
Mhm.
like eye opening, like wow, we're in the middle of this. And like at that point, I don't even think we knew like how much like it would impact, education moving forward. But yeah, like somewhere in COVID, I feel like became like my, okay, this like isn't worth it to me anymore kind of like experience. Like, it just felt like it became like too much. It's almost like the tipping point of like, okay, this is already a lot. It's already honestly too much. And now I think like after COVID, it's just like it's it's way too much. And I feel like people have almost like realized like it it's like not, I don't want to say it's not worth it, but it
No.
feels not worth it. Doesn't it
Well,
feels like it's yeah.
yeah, because we get like I'm not sure how they do the unionization process, like where you guys are, but we have you pretty much I don't think you really can teach in Alberta without being part of the union. Like it's
Okay.
pretty much the entire province.
Yeah.
And we got a survey last year, and I remember being so alarmed by one of the questions. I think it was like the second or third one in. It was a like short answer response, and it said, "Is teaching worth it?" And I felt so struck by that because
Yeah.
again, I'm literally in technically year 4, but
Mhm.
I'm in year 2 really because I
Okay.
actually I I'm in like northern Alberta, so I'm just like extra strange, I guess. Um, but the rule that we have up here is that obviously to substitute teach, you would need a full on degree, right? Like you need
Okay.
your education degree. But where I am kind of in more of a rural location, they allow it so that if you have a university degree of some kind, you are eligible to sub, but at a slightly lower pay for the day. But
Okay.
it kind of worked out great for me because I could substitute teach during the day while doing my education.
Yeah.
So that was really nice. But like one of the things I noticed kind of with the challenges of COVID was like everyone was just in a state of chaos all the time. But I guess my question would be, this is all I know.
Hmm.
So, like, do you have any kind of concern for education kind of moving forward? Like, obviously, sorry, you just had your first child, right?
Yeah.
Is that your first one?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, how are you kind of thinking about their education?
Yeah.
Like, what are you kind of concerned about? Like, do you have any concerns? Like,
Oh yeah. Yeah, I have a lot of concerns.
there are many concerns.
Yeah, no, and it's super conflicting because of like having like my first child. So now it becomes like more real of like, okay, what does this look like? Not just, for my career, but for my like family and my baby. Um but yeah, I'm super concerned. I'm concerned about like how easy it's like become to be a teacher. Of course, like that's
Mhm,
a reaction to the fact that so many teachers are leaving and no one is wanting to become a teacher. And so I think like, because it's so easy to be a teacher, you see this kind of like effect of like lots of micromanaging, and like it's just like intensifying like the reasons teachers are leaving. So it's okay, we're getting some more in, but it's also helping to push out the ones, who have been here and
mhm,
whatever. And so that's a huge concern to me. At any given point, like in my particular school, like we have like a vacancy. And so like
yeah,
I frequently think about like if that was my child, like what would I do? If like, my kid's coming home and they don't have a teacher for X amount of time in the year. Like I just that's like unimaginable. Like when, thinking about like my own high school experience, I'm like, if I went home and told my mom, like my history teacher is just like not here anymore and I don't know when
They're
they're
just
coming
no
back.
one's there.
Yeah, like I don't even know what, we like what happened. So
Yeah,
that's a huge concern, you know, for me for sure. And just in general, like I feel like I grew up in an environment where we were so like passionate about education. I don't know. It's like I don't even know. School is just such a weird place right now, I feel like. And it's still chaotic. It feels like things are chaotic, unpredictable. It's just like I guess that's the fear is like what is going to
Mhm.
happen. Like I feel like teachers have been like screaming like help for, some time now. And I wonder like what it's going to take for like someone who can do something to like pay attention, and actually like make changes. Like I feel like at any moment like education is just there's going to be like some point where it like explodes, and I'm like what's that point going to be, and like then is there going to be change? I don't know.
Yeah, because I've had a few conversations with. I feel like I just like to go and talk to random people who are just kind of in higher positions, and I'm like, hey, like, what do you think? Like, what's going on? And I said, like, is there a tipping point? Like, are we past the tipping point? Like, I don't know, or like, what? How do you define what the tipping point is, and what does it look like?
Yeah.
Because it seems to me, again, with my fresh eyes, I guess,
Yeah.
like a weird. Is it a positive feedback loop anyway? Of as you're saying, the problems that cause teachers to leave are being exacerbated by the teachers leaving,
Yeah.
which is a weird thing because it's like, oh, if one teacher leaves, then we'll just dump the rest of the kids into the other teacher's class. But then it's like now we've got 40 per class, and now that teacher wants to quit, and it's just kind of like this
Exactly.
weird cycle like that. So I guess that's been the most alarming part was because when I was in high school, I mean, I graduated 2015. They and I talked about going into education. Everyone was like, "You'll never get hired." Like, there's just no
Yeah.
jobs. Like, you know what I mean? Not
Yeah.
because of me
Yeah.
personally. Hopefully it wasn't because of me personally.
No,
But,
no, no. Yeah, same. Yeah, I experienced the same. Yeah, that was like the
yeah,
message, and yeah,
and now
crazy.
everyone's like, "You will where do you want to work? What do you wanna do you wanna run the school?" I'm like,
That's
"No, I think
right.
I'm good." But, yeah.
And that's
Um
another scary thing too, is like literally I feel like anyone can teach right now,
mm,
which in some ways is cool, I guess. But
yeah.
but at the same time, like it's not. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's concerning.
How did you start getting down the teachers pay teachers route and kind of creating a little business out of, like, your age?
Yeah. So I started teachers pay teachers. I don't remember, like a minute ago, but really didn't understand like I don't know, like teacher Graham was something I feel like I didn't really like get into or discover until like um right like maybe like right around COVID, maybe right before. Like I didn't really understand like no I did not know it was a thing, but anyway,
Was
so
it
I just
Instagram?
didn't
Sorry?
like the teacher Instagram
Oh, yeah, like,
world. Yeah.
the lane, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I didn't really understand that it was like what it is now, I guess, or I don't know
Mhm,
what I understand it to be. But um yeah, so I had put like resources on there, and I don't know, nothing really happened for like some years.
mm,
And then I started like sharing things to Instagram, and like my teachers pay teachers page like kind of picked up, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool." Um but at some point it was actually like like 2019, that school year, I like was our cheerleading coach prior to that, and I was like our student government sponsor in prom, and like all of these things which I love to do, and I was like this is so fun. I love being so busy. Um and then I like kind of had this moment right before COVID where I was like I'm doing like all these things for school and like I'm not benefiting from them, which is like of course the typical like teacher mindset of like, oh, I don't care, and then it's for the kids. But I was just kind of like maybe I should do like some of these things like for myself, like I always kind of did like all the shirts at our school. Like I
mhm.
like helped design them and order them through the screen printer and all that. And I was kind of like, okay, I know how to do all of that. And I do it for the school like so often. Like why don't I try to do it like for myself? And that was like kind of a weird concept because I think as teachers we're just like naturally and expected to just like kind of not think of ourselves in that way and not like think of like, well, how can this benefit me and how can I make money? But I just kind of like shifted my thinking a little bit, and I was like, I want to try this. I want to sell. Let's see if, I have this design in mind. I want to try to sell a shirt. And so I did that. And then right before, literally, that was like at the beginning of 2020 in like January. And my first like shirt order came in the day we got out of school for COVID, like the day that, so it ended up working out really well. And I've then spent, the next like 2 years, like just putting everything into my business, and like teachers pay teachers as well. And just like selling resources and t-shirts. And yeah, like my mindset just like shifted a little bit, where I was like, I've kind of learned all these really cool skills from teaching and coaching, and and so maybe I should make some money from doing them and
I
supplement my salary.
but I love that even when you're saying that, then like you feel this little guilt. There's like, who's watching me say
Yeah.
this? I think that's like recently I just started, for some reason I just wanted more torture. So I decided to start refereeing like men's league hockey. And it is just, you know what? Like they're still kids in their 30s and 40s, like
That's so funny.
with some of the things that they say. But every time I'm like, you know what? I am kind of sacrificing a little bit of sleep here for this. So maybe I won't be 100%. And you just like feel this thing inside you of like, why is it not okay for us to try to find things elsewhere? So has anyone ever said anything to you about like your business or
Yeah.
anything like that?
Well, I guess may- I don't, maybe they haven't said it to my face, but
Yeah.
I feel
But
like
you
there's
feel it?
definitely, yeah, like there's definitely that
Yeah.
energy of, yeah, um of like, oh, like, so I have kind of an example, I guess. So like at our, I don't know how it works there, but like in Tennessee, we have a part of our evaluation is like the our professionalism. There's a professionalism evaluation,
Mhm.
which I could like write a whole dissertation on, like how it's complete BS and how they realize it, like basically to ask you to do things, like, and it's like for example, I had a principal and love him, but um he was like, okay, for your professionalism evaluation, like you have to work 2 games, of course, for free in the year, or you're gonna get scored low. And I was like, that sucks. But at the time, I was like,
Yeah.
okay, well, I love working games. Like
Yeah.
crazy. I was still in my like honeymoon, teaching. But and then I had actually, so around that time and that year that I started my business, my new assistant principal at the time was doing my evaluation, and she had given me some like lower scores on it. And I was like we were having our like post conference, and I was like, what is, like, I deserve all fives in this. Like I here's the
Mhm.
rubric, like I do these things, and she was like, well, you compared to like your past version of you is not the same, or like so she was essentially like giving me lower scores because I wasn't doing what I used to be, doing. And I was just like, absolutely not. That's not, you can't measure me against myself, like a former version of myself. Like, what is this? So I like fought that because I was, and so I had like sent all this evidence, and she ended up giving me the scores that I wanted. But I was like, that was like eye opening for me because I was like, like that's, I mean, then that's the kind of stuff in education that just like pisses me off.
Yeah.
That sucks. That's crazy, Yeah.
Well, yeah, because again, any sort of venture that you engage in outside of school does have some sort of opportunity cost where you're not doing everything for the kids. That's true. But
Absolutely.
like, to what extent are you just supposed to be effective at your job during the day, and like, why is there zero respect for time outside to pursue other things? Because I would actually probably bet, I mean, I'm only just meeting you, but you're probably a better educator now because
Yeah,
you're literally creating resources, one, to like hopefully sell, and but also two, like you're probably using these and you're developing new materials and you're reconsidering the content, and you're like, okay, how can I relay this to my students better, and how can I translate that to other people? To me, that doesn't
exactly.
even, because like, not I mean, when you're young and you start a podcast, it's pretty obvious that people are gonna start saying some things, which is fine. But it's like, even though I feel the opportunity cost myself, and sometimes because I'm like, am I putting too much time into maybe doing this kind of stuff? But it's literally talking about education and trying
Right.
to be a better educator. So I'm like, I don't know why I feel that shade as well, but it's comforting that that seems to be the norm, both from an international person like myself, and like where you're at as well. But so obviously being from Canada, there's always a lot of like demonization might be the wrong word, but a lot of, let's just say, verbal defecation on the American public education system.
I
And
bet.
now I don't expect you to be like this mass expert in like the quality of the American education system, but like has it has there any like what are the main issues where you are? And do you think that's just kind of everywhere, or do you think it's maybe overblown?
Man, it's like where do you start?
Yeah.
So
Well,
I
you know what? So I see like I'll see pictures of like the Amazon boxes stacked when
uh
teachers are like, "Oh, I only have 2 desks for 39 students." You know what I mean? It's like that's kind
yeah.
of the things that you'll see. Now, I feel like across the board, generally speaking, education is underfunded. Like I don't see there's a Canadian versus American
Mhm.
difference, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah, so I well, first, when I was, doing my doctorate, I took a class on, like, international education. That was, like, super eye-opening. I think we had to read, like, that book, The Smartest Kids in the World, and yeah, it's like I knew that education in America wasn't great, but, like,
Mhm.
went through that class, I was like, "Wow, no, like, yikes." Like, and I think the biggest part is, like, a lot of the, like, readings we did and discussions we had were around, like, so we know that X, like, has good results, but, like, we don't
Mhm.
do it in America, and it's like, why? Like class sizes and, like, even, like, they had looked at, like, math textbooks and, like, how our math textbooks compare to those in, like, other countries and just, like, so many things, but what goes on, of course, like, in Canada or, other places, but I feel like the things that I've noticed from teaching here for 11 years, one, the idea of, um I don't know, I think, like, our private school, public school, charter school, vouchers, all the this
Mhm.
um, kind of idea around, like, if you pay more money, you're gonna get a better education.
Mhm.
From what I understand, like, it's not necessarily like that everywhere. There are some places that don't place that same, um, kind of, like, level of prestige around, like, private schools or, things like that.
Yeah. The
Um
American so yeah, one thing I heard was in Canada, they don't ask you where you went to university, they ask what you studied. In the US, they ask you where you went to university.
Yeah.
I always and you know what? I feel like me applying my stereotype lens on the US. Oh, sorry, that's a very big stereotype lens. I think that's more so true. Like it's like, "Oh, did you receive an Ivy League education?" Like that's more of a like and you'll kind of get hired because of where you were accepted. And now again, the certain competition and like the difficulty of getting into those schools definitely does have some merit in terms of like who you hire, which I think is totally fair.
Yeah.
But I just I just don't necessarily believe that there's this massive discrepancy because I've even noticed that. Um, 'Cause I always thought it was funny. I was like, oh, they said because I'm from a pretty conservative province. I think it's the most conservative province in Canada. I would argue till my death. But like Tennessee, I'm assuming is a pretty conservative place as well, and pretty similar parallels. But I was like, no one wants to teach in private schools either. Like
Yeah, yeah.
that's it's not necessarily that there's like I don't think there's this big conspiracy to phase out public education. Now, some people might. Some people might have um, their issues with unionizations, and you know what? There's probably issues with them that I'm not really as well versed in. Um, but like no one wants to teach in public or private schools. So really, I think I like how did it like so I always not always say, but in there's always a "make teaching great again" narrative in education, I
Yeah,
find. Like, there's
yeah.
just this like, the glory days are behind us, and now we're just in the trenches every day. But, like, if the whole world was listening to you for 2 minutes, like, what are the things that you would say, like, "This needs to be a concrete change," and why?
Yeah. Um, well, I think honestly, like the United States education system has to have like national reform. Like it has
Mhm.
to. I feel like right now we're trying to um kind of solve problems within like schools and districts and maybe even
Yeah.
states. But I don't think it's enough. Like none of that is enough. Um I really feel like there has to be like national reform
Mhm.
and like beginning with like actually including teachers in the conversation and decision making like when it comes to like the changes we make in schools. Like I think it's insane that the people making those decisions a lot of times like aren't teachers, maybe never have been. And that's like wild to me. um I feel like that is like one of the biggest issues is just this general sense of like not listening to teachers and like it just being accepted like,
Mhm.
oh, I know that this is what's right or that this is going to work and this isn't going to work, but like no one cares like what my opinion is, you know? And it's like
Yep.
it's kind of it's weird, and it's even like
Yep.
getting my doctorate, it was even more eye-opening because I'm like, okay, I just went and like, you know, got my like doctorate in education, and still I don't think that like anyone cares about, you know, my opinion on educational matters. And it's like, what? You know, like it's so crazy. But yeah, that in itself is just it's huge. I think
'Cause I was even sorry, I was even gonna
no, go ahead.
say, because you guys do the SAT, right? Is that still
SAT and
the
ACT, yeah.
I
So,
don't know what either of those are.
depending on where you are, you take either the
Yeah.
SAT or the ACT, which is not.
So what is the so we like, we don't have a national test
Oh,
in Canada.
okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah, so
That's
we
great.
only so and actually in Alberta, we have, like, what's called, like, the diploma exam, which is only it's like grade 3, 6, 9, and 12, but the grade 12 one is actually worth sometimes 50% of your grade, sometimes it's
Wow,
worth 30%. It's a range back and forth since COVID. Like, the year I finished high school, it was 50%, so, like,
wow,
only a half of what you did in class was really worth your grade, and I've had a few conversations with people about the merit of that, but Alberta, as far as I know, and I could be wrong, is we're the only one who implements that level of intensity with our
wow,
standardized testing, and I think other provinces do them as, like, a benchmark, but in terms of the way that it weights towards your, um, grade is only that intense in Alberta.
wow.
But and I've kind of I don't know if I've just been successfully indoctrinated a little bit, but I have started to see more of the merit in terms of maintaining consistency with standardized education.
Okay.
Would you like what are your I and again, I not that I'm saying it's correct and this is the way. It's like I've seen more of the point. Does
Mhm.
that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think that's another good point. Like one
Mhm.
I was having a conversation with an educator, and kind of got to this point of like it's strange because I feel like we don't know like this like what is the one good way or you know of teaching of like how to do education, like how to like it's kind of wild to me. That was another thing I learned in that class is and I don't remember the like specifics with this, but
Mhm.
essentially somewhere in the United States, they were having one state in particular was having like really good scores or results with like a way that they were like teaching a certain subject. And then the question was like, so why aren't we all doing that? You know, like why is like why like and that's so frustrating. And I feel like it's this like constant competition of like let's try this and let's try this program and let's implement this, and we're like constantly like doing those things and then like none of it's
Yeah.
working. And it's just like isn't there
Yeah.
research
Yeah,
out there?
this random reading program from Singapore is what we're gonna
Yeah.
do, and it's gonna be the answer to all of our problems, and I'm like, I and again, in my smaller sample size, it was very, because have you ever taught at a different school? You kind of been at the same school the whole
I
time?
have. I taught in Illinois because I'm originally from Illinois. I taught in Illinois for 2
Okay.
years. And actually, when you were mentioning the private school, when we were talking about that, I actually student taught in a private school, and I did that because at the time, it was in my hometown, and my hometown's pretty small. We have like one public high school and one private high school, and um, one of my cousins went to the private high school, and the rest of us went to the public one. And we always kind of have this like, it's like a big rivalry there. And when you go to the public high school, like you hate you hate it. But you
The other side
also
of the train tracks.
yeah, you also couldn't teach at any of the schools that you went to, and I wanted to do my student teaching. Sorry, you couldn't
Really?
student teach. I want to do my
Oh,
student
I
teaching at
did.
home, and so I was like, maybe I should go to the private school, and I always like talk all this stuff like about the private school and how it sucks, but like really I don't know. So like let me,
Mhm.
go see what it's about. And it was really eye-opening because I was like, wow, people pay, and like no offense to them, like, to each their own. And I know they probably pay for other things other than the education, I guess. Maybe the family vibes, or I don't know, the religious aspect. But I was
Yeah.
like, I can't believe like people pay for this. Like, cause like you said, like no one wants to teach right now. Private school teachers aren't any more like educated or knowledgeable, and a lot of times like they make less money. So I'm like, you really have to wonder like what is the like or like the people who work in private schools, like what is their like kind of reasoning, or
Mhm.
for that. And I think there's a lot of different unique things out there, maybe like free tuition, or maybe
Yeah.
that religious aspect, or maybe, hey, I don't have to work out, I don't want to, but I can work here. I don't know, it was just really eye-opening because I was like, this is not, in my opinion, a better educational experience. It does have aspects of like, okay, we have church every other week, or
Mhm.
but it just like opened my eyes to like, okay, like people pay for this. And it's just
Yeah, and well, I've had because my oldest brother, he was a pastor,
okay.
once upon a time, and like right now, like I've always like jokingly said to him, he's got this like beautiful brand new public school right next to him, like right next to their house, and like it was just built like 3 4 years ago, and they're in a Christian school that he pays for that's like 25 minutes away. And I'm like, bro, literally, bro, like
Yeah,
I
like,
just
what
don't.
are you doing?
And but I guess my real reasoning is like I think there's like the role for religious education is at home and on Sundays. That's kind of my,
Yeah,
again, and I
that's
would
my
never judge
opinion
anyone
too.
for doing that. 'Cause I think like putting your kid into the melting pot is going to be better for them long term. I think because then the world isn't as much of a shock
Yeah,
once you're kind of actually there. Like I remember, I always tell the story. I grew up pretty religious again,
yeah,
in Newfoundland actually. So I'm from the East Coast, um,
okay.
and we were from a small town, like 500 people. And I remember moving to where I live now, and I was in grade 2, and we were having a conversation, and I was like, "Yeah, like, what does your family have for dinner after church on Sunday?" And they were like, "We don't go to church." They're like, "We don't go to church." I was like, "I'm going to school with sinners?" I was like, "What?" I was like, "This is crazy." Yeah, I just remember it being such an eye-opening thing, and that was still at a Catholic school, I guess, but, like, it's not very rigid here of, like, if you need to be religious to go to the religious school because we only have 2
Yeah,
districts, public and Catholic. Um, yeah, I don't know, I just thought that was so crazy, but again, looking at the private system, my thing was kind of back to that, oh, in the US, they ask where you went to university, Canada, they ask what you studied. I'm like, well, like, what would I have like, I did history and political science in undergrad, a classic social teacher route, but I'm like, what would I have gained more by doing history and poli sci at Yale or at Harvard
mhm,
or
yeah,
at UCLA? Not that maybe it is better, but I'm like, all the professors' readings that are there, I can just look on JSTOR and find them here in this database. So I've never really understood. And like, I think I looked at LSU for I think like Odell Beckham Jr. went there, so I was just kind of googling it, and it was like $33,000 US a year, like for just basic undergraduate tuition, and now this is one thing that is a little bit different. because Canada does subsidize even university education.
Okay.
So I think for 1 full year of university for myself, I think it's gone up like 5% since I graduated, but it was well, if you don't mind me asking, like, what was kind of the rough tuition range for you
Yeah, I think I paid, around that 30,000 mark a year for my
a year?
undergrad. Mhm.
And so 30,000 US would be like 40,000 Canadian a
Okay.
year, and I would pay total for 1 year of tuition only $8,000
Oh my
Canadian.
gosh.
So that would be about 6,000 American, but I've never really understood because I think Canada only subsidizes half the tuition price.
Hmm.
So really, I think the whole value of that was really only 16 to 18,000 Canadian, which is about 14 American. So I've
Yeah.
just always thought that was like, why don't they just come to Canada for school? But maybe it's
Yeah.
because they think it's like the internalized belief that like this is a better education. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean,
But
honestly, I feel like and maybe it could be that I'm, was from a smallish town, not 500, but,
yeah, well, I was 2 when I moved, so I wasn't
okay,
that old.
okay. But I feel like I remember, like, as a teacher now, I, like, would always I encourage students to, like, go out of state and, like, go
Mhm.
somewhere else or, whatever, like, utilize that experience to, see things and whatever. Anyway, I don't remember when I was, like, in high school and approaching college, like, even thinking about going out of state, which is, like, so weird to me
Yeah,
now. Like, I'm like, like, why wouldn't I? But it
yeah,
just, like, didn't even I feel like it maybe is was, like, my small town bubble of just, like, I don't know, but yeah, so, like, going to Canada would never even,
yeah.
cross my
So
mind, but
I think even for like international students, because you would be the international one here, it would be I think it's like 10,000 Canadian per semester. So it is
wow.
more, but still like relatively speaking. And
Yeah.
again, I did grow up in Alberta and went to university in Alberta. I went in Edmonton and Calgary, so like that kind of maybe makes more sense as to my mine wasn't as expensive. But again, I'm also thinking like I see you as someone who's done very well, so maybe there is a point to maybe
No.
where you
No, and that's the thing is, like, so, like, the school I went to Illinois State University for my undergrad. I went there mostly well, my mom went there. It's known for, like, teaching, like, that's their like,
Mhm.
one of their big things, like, their education program, but, like, it's a state school, like, it's just, it's
Yeah,
and it still was, expensive. Yeah, I don't feel like
yeah.
I don't know, I feel like kinda had those thoughts when I was getting my master's and my doctorate because I got my master's and my doctorate from the same school. It was like a private school here in Nashville.
Mhm.
Um, and as I was doing that, I was kinda like even thinking of like the advice I give students regarding college, like I mean, granted, like it was expensive too because it's like a private university and all that. But my point is, I don't think necessarily that like the education is that much greater at school, at some schools. Like a lot of my students like will get like full rides to certain places like for academics and because they're like in Tennessee and it's right here, I'm like, go somewhere else. But now I'm like, no, like
Yeah.
take the full ride, like it's I don't know, like yeah, I don't feel like it's probably not that much of a difference.
Well,
I
and
don't
I think that begs the question of like, what does being educated mean to you? Like
yeah.
when you're talking to your students, because I've always wondered. Sometimes I'm just like, am I just babysitting? Like I don't like I don't know, like am I, like what am I actually offering these kids in terms of like advancing their levels of understanding in certain areas? Like obviously I have my like I'm not teaching them calculus and so in a social studies classroom, but
Yeah.
I'm like, how do you? I would just say the more educated you are, the more aware of the things you don't know,
Yeah.
and that's kind of been, but like is there a price difference on that in terms of where you go? Like, I don't know. I'm just wondering, like, what is it? It's successful marketing. I've just never really understood.
Yeah. I
Because
I
again,
think
even
that's a really
myself,
good question.
like, if I like, I've known professors that I had in university who are now down in the U.S. and like pursuing and continuing their PhD, and I'm like, I wouldn't mind pursuing secondary or advanced education in the US either, but, like and then I don't know, maybe I had this weird healthcare thing too that I'm like, "Am I just gonna die when I go down there?"
Yeah.
So it was funny, like,
Very fair.
obviously, Canada has, like, public healthcare. I mean, we definitely have our faults too. Um, but we went to Florida, and my brother thought again, same brother, he thought it'd be a really good idea to dive so we had, like, we rented a house for, like, a Disney vacation, and there was our pool in the backyard that we had for about a week was only probably 4 feet deep. I mean, he's 6'4". And
Oh.
he's like, "It would be really cool to dive headfirst into this pool like Mr. Bean does."
Oh my gosh.
I'm like and so we didn't hear this reasoning until after. But then he goes headfirst into the pool. He gets out, he's like, "Oh, what is happening?" And he's just bleeding everywhere.
Oh
Like,
my gosh.
what? I'm actually reading a book, on, like, JFK and Martin Luther King, and I'm just there like, "What?" I was like and then we get the towel, there's blood everywhere, then we go, and I think even though we had insurance, he had staples put in his head, and they offered, like they were about to put a needle in to numb it for the staple, he's like, "Whoa, how much is that?" And they're like, 500 US. He's like, "Just put the staples in."
Oh my gosh.
So I was
That is
like
so funny.
no, and then, like, after we were like, my dad was like, "George, like, why would you do that?" He's like, "Mr. Bean does it." Like, I
Oh
craziest,
my
like
god.
yeah, but anyway, that was my, I guess, Canadian American healthcare story that it wasn't me, but it was,
Right.
and I'm sure he won't mind me telling that story on
Yeah.
here, but,
That is
so I just
hilarious.
got a couple more things to ask you, if you
Yeah,
don't
of
mind.
course.
Obviously, another thing I've noticed with my keen sense of awareness, um, the way that male and female teachers are, like, spoken to in different ways, both by
Mm,
students and parents. Have
mhm.
you kind of noticed that as well?
Yeah, absolutely, and even, like, um, I have, like, opinions on even, like, how male teachers and female teachers, like, operate, like,
Mhm.
differently in
Okay.
education, I
I
just
love opinions. Lay
yeah.
'em out.
So, like, okay, for example, I just, like, noticed in my school like, so when we'd be asked, of course, to, like, cover classes, and teachers are out and we can't get
Yeah.
subs, and I remember a lot of times where male teachers would be, like, kinda telling me a story of, like, "Yeah, they asked me to, cover this class for a 3rd time in a row, and I just told them no." And I was like, "What? Like, what do you
What?
mean you told them no?"
I
Like,
wouldn't do that, but
yeah, like, you can't
it's kinda
tell them
crazy.
no, And they're like, "Yeah, and I just told them no, and I'm not doing that." And I was like, "That's I can't I just like my
That's
brain
wild.
like can't even yeah." And so I feel like that like is actually like a thing, like where male teachers, I feel like a lot of times kind of um like I don't know, like the where it's of course it's like a female dominated profession, I think. And
Mhm.
that's changing, which I think is great.
Well, I think
Um
even high school is a bit more on the 50-50 end, I would say.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, it's just interesting that, and that side of things that just how male teacher like, and almost I feel like they can like get away with that a little bit more. Like where I feel
Yeah.
like if I was like, no, I'm not doing that, it would be like, she's, I don't know, but that's funny to me, and interesting. But in terms of like the other way, I also feel like male teachers kind of like get away with a little bit more in terms of like what they wear and like um even just like how they like run their classroom or like how like I don't know, it's just and not always and not in every
Mhm.
way, but I just think that's funny. But
Do you have
yeah,
anything specific that you're thinking that comes to mind when you think of how they run their classroom?
yeah, and I just think of like not all
I like the
males.
smirk.
Not
No,
all
no, but,
males,
like,
right? Like there's
tendencies, yeah.
yeah, like there's some who I feel like run their classroom pretty normally. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know. But then there's like some who it's almost like the like male PE teacher coach, but I'm not a PE teacher. Like, I just see that kinda, like, mantra a lot of, like
Why do I feel so hurt all of a sudden?
um, yeah, so I just kinda see that being like a thing, like,
Yeah.
you go into their class and it's just I don't know. It's just
Yeah.
different. When you go into other teachers' classes, like, I love to do that because, like, no matter, like, if
Yeah.
the teacher is, like, really great or maybe not so great, like, you just, like, learn so much. I wish that, like, we could just do that more. Of course, we, like, never have enough time, but it's just so
Or, like,
interesting, like,
observe
the
them teach?
dynamic. Yeah, like, just
Yeah.
like, I always just feel like no matter what class like, when I've had to observe teachers for, like, practicum things and, with my master's and doctorate, like, I was just like, oh, every time I did it, I was like, I wish I did this more. Just like, I don't know, just like come and like hang out, and just like see, like no feedback, none of that. Like I just want to like
Just
watch,
wanna
like
see.
take it in, and you just learn so much. Like even from teachers who suck. Like I feel like I learn a lot, like just like watching, because like everyone has like things that like they do that like for whatever reason, and they,
Yeah.
like, work in some ways or, you just find
Yeah.
it so interesting where you're like, "Oh my gosh, like, that's I would have never thought of that," and anyway, but to answer your question, 'cause I know I just totally went
No, I love
all
it,
over
that's
that,
fine.
um, yeah, I feel like with parents, and especially, like, I'm 5 feet tall, um,
Yep.
so like, even up until now, like I feel like parents, when they would see me, it was just like not take me seriously as like a teacher. Like they would, and like the longer I was at my school, I felt like, of course you start knowing like siblings and families, and you develop more of like that, like, credibility.
Mhm.
But
Well, you
yeah,
have to
like,
earn it more depending on your
yeah,
size,
it
which is
takes a really
weird.
long
Yeah.
time. And even like when I thought about like, okay, should I go to like I feel like I want to go to a different school, but like that process of like building that credibility again and like building those relationships and having it so like students come in knowing you from their siblings, like I was like, that sounds exhausting to do again,
I
like
never even
it does,
thought about that.
it takes some years. And
Yeah.
I was just like, I don't really feel like doing that right now. Just too much.
So, what would be now again, I don't wanna my goal is to never demean any specific teacher, and I never would. But, like, what would be an attribute of a teacher that sucks?
um gosh, yeah, and
Strictly
that's
attributes, not
attributes. Well, okay, there's like a spectrum, I feel like, to this. Like there's
Mhm.
teachers who like should not be in the classroom, and I'm not even really referring to them. Like that they're on a whole different level of like, you know, I feel
Yeah.
like I've seen a lot of bad teachers. Like there
Mhm.
are a lot of bad teachers. I hate to like
Mhm.
even say that, but like there are.
Yeah.
There um
But that's any job anywhere. Like,
absolutely,
no one
absolutely.
yeah, like, no one's going to be but yeah, continue.
Absolutely. But I feel like it's almost like obvious sometimes where like people will get hired and I like make a little game with myself where I'm like, that person's not gonna last. Like that's my first round draft pick for like they're not going to last. And it's just like I don't know. I know we're in this state of like
Oh, we have
can't
a
hire
word for
anyone.
it. It's like you get surplus. That's our the big word in Alberta, I think.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's like, "Oh, we need to relocate you somewhere because I think it was funny that you said that you were evaluated a second time later on. Like, here, as far as I'm aware, we do temporary, probationary, and continuing. That's, like, our
Uh-huh.
3 contracts. And so last year, I did my probationary contract where you get 6 evaluations throughout the year, like,
Wow.
3 one semester, 3 the next semester.
Uh-huh.
And then but, like so now sometimes they have it so that the assistant superintendent or the superintendent will just walk into your room on any given day
Oh
for,
my
like,
gosh.
a 30-minute, which is
Terrifying.
terrifying. Um, and, like, imagine the surprise admin visit, but, like, your superintendent just walks in for 30 minutes, and you're like, "Ugh." But it's gone pretty good. But anyway,
That's good.
with the continuing contract, I thought that was kind of interesting when you said that, like, you were scored differently based on who you were before. we don't get evaluated anymore
No way.
on a continuing contract.
I
As
love
far as
that.
I know, unless there's, like, a need for, like, maybe there's a complaint and maybe they have to do an
Yeah.
investigation. I have no idea. I mean,
Mhm.
luckily, that hasn't happened to me yet. But, yeah, like, right now, they're like, "Yeah, you're continuing. Here's your courses. Go
Oh
for
my
it."
gosh,
Like,
I
that
love
was
that.
kinda the which, again, like, I think obviously has the potential to be abused because, like, people can say, like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I'm employed for life now, like, I can just sit back and coast until retirement," but, like, again, I think most teachers have the "I like to be busy" vibe, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that's most people, I think, but, yeah, I thought that was interesting, like, how often do you have to get and so sorry, 2 things. Have you had to, like, evaluate teachers yourself doing their practicums, or were you just doing master's work in a class?
I was, yeah, I was just having to go in and observe.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know if you were like an admin type, like looking at teachers who
No,
were
I
student
have
teachers.
I have my admin license, but I haven't used it yet
Yeah,
officially.
it's
Yeah.
probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Is that for the best? Yeah, the more I guess like when you're going into teaching, my you're thinking is like, okay, there's what's the hierarchy here? Like, what can I potentially work toward? Like, you're looking at oh, the VP principal, associate, under secretary, super, like they're all the word salad of names in the district
Yeah.
offices. I'm like, okay, like maybe I can maybe work up to that. And I'm only a couple years, maybe like 4 really of kind of being around. I'm like,
And you're like,
doesn't seem to be my first choice anymore. Like I would
yeah.
love to still do master's PhD work, but I still think that the classroom grind seems more appealing than just the constant fire protection. It pretty much is
Mhm.
kind of what I would describe my
Yeah.
observation. Um, because then it's like the teachers that suck aren't your problem. You're just kind of
Right.
doing your thing. And again, I'm sure I've got lots I can work on, and I'm sure I honestly
Same, same.
I hope 5 years from now I'm like I was a complete idiot 5 years ago. I didn't know anything, but I think that that's a good thing if you're thinking that. Um,
Yeah.
but so I got 2 more things to ask you. Sorry if I'm keeping you here.
No, 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 you're totally
Um,
this is good.
but like now that you're kind of a new mom, what kind of student parent are you gonna be?
Oh my gosh, such a good question. So my mom was like psycho and like she I, like, still remember this day, like, getting my initials on the board in kindergarten and my
Oh,
teacher
man.
calling her, yeah, and, like, I never got in trouble in school again because my mom was like that was her big thing as, like, a teacher mom, like,
Yeah.
"Don't you dare embarrass me," like,
Yeah.
with my even though she worked in a different district, like, "Don't embarrass me with other teachers," and that I was, like, did not wanna do that, so
It's a lot of pressure, though. Like,
it
it's like
is.
a different yeah.
Yeah, and so I have stepchildren as well, and so we have
Mhm.
one of my stepchildren is here with us all the time, and he's 7, and so I've kinda gotten to experience it a little bit,
Okay, yeah.
you know, and that's like and my husband also works we work at the same school, and so he's also in the, educator mindset, and so and that's like we do mention that of just, like, "Don't embarrass us with teachers," like, I
Yeah.
always say, like, there are students that I've had where I'm like, "Oh my gosh, their parent's a teacher and they act like this?" I'm like, "What?" That's
Because
not that's
you do kinda shoot a glance. You're like,
yeah,
this
I'm like,
shouldn't be."
"What?"
Like, you
Um,
should have some shame for
yeah, like, I'm like, I just don't wanna ever be that parent
Yeah.
of, that student, but, yeah, I feel like well, for one, I'll not hopefully think that, like, my student is my my child is their teacher's only student. I'll,
Yeah.
try really hard to not do that, and I can see why parents do, but
Mhm.
I know as a teacher, that's just, like, so frustrating.
But I liked what you said, like, at the start of our conversation where, like, they think they know what's going on, but, like, it's not their fault that they don't. Like,
Yeah,
that did kind of twist my perspective a bit. Like, they don't like, they only know what they know. It's
yeah,
like they can only say so much on, like, what actually happens on beyond here, but yeah, go on, sorry.
yeah. No, that's I actually recently because I feel like I go really hard on non-educators who, like, comment on like, whenever I have, like, sort of like a post that is maybe a little controversial. Like, there will always be some non-educators who like comment, teachers complain so much, and I go really hard on those people. 'Cause I'm always just like, why is this like your personality to hate teachers? Like, it's so weird.
Yeah, that is a
But
weird angle.
yeah, like, I'm like, find something else to, grasp onto. But I actually like have been thinking of a post like that I want to post soon of like I was kind of wrong. Like, I've kind of thought recently that yeah, like like maybe I'm going a little too hard because there are so many things in education that like we can't talk about, like because
Yeah,
of like the legality and just different things, it's taboo to talk about the this that goes on. And so I'm like, it's I guess not completely their fault that they think we complain all the time because they just really don't get it, you know? I don't know.
I know, and
And I
even
yeah.
the taboo part, I've wondered, like, how do you like, what is the taboo and how can you engage in it in, like, a productive way? Because
Yeah.
really that's kind of like, we're all kind of living with the, like, alcoholic father we don't talk about.
Yeah.
Or the uncle, you know what I mean? It's like a
Mhm.
weird, like, we're just kind of ignoring things and just
Yep.
kind of, like, sweeping it under the rug and just hoping, like, "Yeah, we only got 2 months to the end of the semester, and then we'll figure it out." Like, I mean, because obviously you can't really speak on your own experience because then people will be like, "Oh, you're literally naming," like, students will know, like, you've only taught so many classes, they'll kinda know who you're talking about. So, like, the goal eventually, even for this kind of project, is like having people share their taboo anonymously, and then just be like, no, let's just talk about it, not demonize it or just whatever, but try to like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we trying to do here? But yeah, but when it comes to being like, I don't have any children yet, but I think I'm going to be so like, I'm not gonna believe a word my kids say. Like,
Th
I just
Yes.
like,
Yeah, thank
I'll
you.
just
I
be
was
like, you're
about to
such a
say that.
BSer, like.
Yes, I was about to say that. Absolutely.
Look.
That's like one of the number one things that comes to mind is because like the students will like tell like I remember last year they were like telling me some of the things that they told their parents like around progress report
Yeah.
time. And I was like, do your parents believe that? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, I was in shock. I had, like, one student in this class of, like, 30 something whose parent who was like, "My parent would never buy that." The rest of them were like, "Oh, yeah," like and I was like my mind was blown. So I was just like, I knew that, like, parents, like, tend to believe their students way more
Mhm.
than my mom would ever,
Yeah.
but I was like, I didn't realize it was, like, this bad.
Yeah, I the other day, I was because again, only in a town of 75,000, you don't it's a smaller town than you'd think. So
Mhm.
I was walking through, our, like, sport check here in town, and I saw one of my students with his mom, and he's the student has been improving over the semester, and I walked up to them, and I kinda walked over, and, like, as soon as they saw me, they're like the first thing it wasn't, "Hi, Mr. Clark," it was, "You haven't marked any of my stuff yet." Like, it just came out, and but I was actually walking over to
My
tell
gosh.
that well, that day I had marked, like, one of their unit assessments, and I think they got, like, an 85 on it. So I was actually gonna walk up and say, like, that they're
Yeah,
doing
like,
really
great
good, but, like,
job.
their first reaction was just panic, blame the teacher, they're the reason. I was like, "This is so strange. I literally came up to have a good moment with
Right, right.
you."
That's hilarious. That's yeah, story
Yeah,
of my
which I think
life
is
right now.
that's kind of education in a nutshell. But you know what? I wasn't the best student in high school either, so I don't think that's necessarily new. I think that's kind of been the norm, but I don't know. Maybe things have gotten worse. But anyway, I got one more question to ask you,
Okay.
Jen. Uh, I always end off my episodes with a big signature quote, as you would. It's education is what remains once we forget everything that we learned in school. So, what is it that you want your students to take away from their experience with you specifically in your classroom that they wouldn't get anywhere else?
Yeah, I feel like I just want my students to I mean, like, of course, the cliche of, like, think critically is, but
Mhm.
I really want them to, like
That
be
should be
able
cliche.
to yeah, I really want them to be able to, like, like, think critically and be
Mhm,
able to, like, um find, like, question everything, like, wanna know further, not just accept what's put in front of them, not just accept, like, like, when we read a text or when they over like, come across, like, some like, an argument or even, like, in the world, like, if someone's, like, BSing them, like, I just want them to know, like, you have the power to do that, and you should question things, you should, always, like, want, like, the best of, whatever it is, and
mhm,
kind of strive for that and question when it's not happening, and
mhm,
advocate for yourself when you don't feel like that's happening. I just want, like, I guess, my students to, like, feel empowered, to that, like, they're knowledgeable, like, they
mhm.
are capable and should, like, fight for just really anything, like,
Capable, and I like that. Like,
experiences.
learn that
Yeah.
you're capable of executing your vision for yourself.
Yeah.
That would be, you
Absolutely.
kinda triggered a memory just then of,
Uh-oh.
when I did, like, a history of political thought course. I know it sounds super sophisticated. I didn't do very well in it, but we were reading, I think it was, like, the 4 texts on Socrates,
Uh-huh.
and I remember, like, when it comes to, like, be critical about what you're reading, I remember reading this passage, and I think Socrates was defending himself to the court, and they my professor was unpacking this line, and I was reading everything in, like, a very serious tone, but then he pointed out these 2 lines, I can't even remember what they were. It's like, he's making a joke. Like, he's actually trolling the court in saying this. But, like, that total reframe of, like, the way you're perceiving what you're reading is actually the complete opposite, potentially.
Yeah.
That was such, like, an eye-opening moment for me, but, like, kinda what you were saying there, but yeah.
Yeah.
Well, beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. This is fun,
No
and I
worries.
appreciate the work you're doing with, that's one big thing, like, I try to do and strive to do on social media is, like,
Mhm,
put those taboo things out there that,
mhm,
for so long teachers have felt like they can't talk about, and,
mhm,
I that's just, like, one of my big kinda, like, passions and goals is to, like, share, like, the reality, of teaching,
mhm.
and so I appreciate, that you're, doing the same kinda work with your podcast. I think that's really cool.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Yeah.